Welcome to Dear Brothers and Sisters, where you will hear the raw truth. My name is George. I am your brother, and I love you. This week is the second part of a three-part series having to do with our education. Last week we discussed the problem with education at the grade school level. This week we will discuss the problem with education at the high school level. However, before proceeding with our discussion for the day, I remind you again that we have a book, Dear Brothers and Sisters, Gender and Its Responsibility. It's the only book that discusses gender on the basis of a universal principle. It's a book I wrote 3 years ago, and it is the book that we use as the basis for our discussions on this program. We also have available flyers of our program. The Raw Truth by George lists the date and time of our program. I have here, Are You a Bull or Are You Hamburger Meat? And on the other side it says American Women and the Harem Master. They're considered to be two of the best articles that I've written. They're available for free. All you have to do is call up, give us your name and address. We'll send you some. We also have videotapes and audio tapes of our more popular programs. You can get information on all of this material, on our movement, by calling 874-7900, extension 1329. That's 874-7900, extension 1329. If you care to do that now, we're going to recite the 7 major issues that we recite at the beginning of every program, so this would be an excellent time for you to go and do it if you're one of our regular viewers. Now for the 7 major issues. We have 1.5 million American men in prison, incarcerated, in jail, living in cages. 1.5 million. That's a 50% increase from the time that I wrote my book in 1992. A 50% increase in 3 to 4 years. We have the highest incarceration rate in the world, my brothers and sisters, and this is the tragedy of our time. And it's time that we rise up and do something about it. Number 2, we have 1 million of our youth in street gangs, which is a natural result of our men being in prison. Since there is no masculine influence in their lives and the masculine principle was not able to work through the system, it oozed out of the system. Street gangs are little more than a setup of the tribal structure that has served humanity since the beginning. Number 3, our women are deteriorating physically, mentally, and emotionally. They have an increasing incidence of cirrhosis of the liver, of lung cancer. 3 to 4 million single women now have human papillomavirus or chlamydia. They are overworked, stressed out, apprehensive about the safety of their children and their own well-being. And that's just the top. That's the tip of the iceberg. Number 4, we have unprecedented crime in this nation. And do not let the recent spate of statistics fool you. Crime is down for one reason only. We've picked up 500,000 men and thrown them into prison, and tens of thousands of children in juvenile detention centers. And if you say, well, George, isn't that the way they handle crime, to put the criminals in jail? If we have 1.5 million criminals in this nation, there's something wrong with this nation. There's no amount of punishment is going to make society safe. It's high moral and ethical standards that make for a safe society. Just wait till the bumper crop of children, or the children from the last bumper crop of unwed mothers reaches adolescence. Then you're really going to see crime. Where are we? Number 5. Our educational system is in a state of dysfunction. Our high schools are holding pens that teach little more than how to use condoms. Our colleges give increasingly higher grade point averages to students with lower and lower SAT scores. Our economy is stagnant at best. That's because we have forgotten the source of new. You see, it's new that makes the economy grow. It's new that creates jobs. And number 7, morality and ethics have disappeared from the media. There is no morality and ethics in the media, or in our government, for that matter. Those are the 7 major issues affecting us today, my brothers and sisters. But now let's get to the subject at hand today, and that has to do with our school system. Last week we discussed the grade schools, and we showed that the major problems that the teachers were having were disciplinary problems and a lack of standards. You couldn't set anybody back. You had to graduate everybody, and the children were unruly. And we pointed out that this was a function of the lack of the masculine influence. Men set standards and men maintain discipline. You remove men, throw them into prison. You have single-parent households, and the children are in trouble, and the teachers and the children suffer accordingly. Now let's move on to high school. In preparing for this lesson, I tried to find out what is considered to be the difference between information and knowledge. I read Webster's dictionary and a couple other dictionaries, and they intermingle the 2 terms. So, since I didn't get a clear definition from Webster, I'm going to give you a clear definition from George. And after all, why shouldn't I be able to present my definition? And who's to say that his, Webster's, would be any better than mine? I wrote down, knowledge is the first cause from which information flows. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? You get information from knowledge. It's the source of information. It's the ability required when a question or circumstance arises that cannot be answered or dealt with due to the limits of existing information. You need knowledge for that. Okay. Where does knowledge come from? And how is information learned? Well, information can be learned by rote and from experience. Right? Information can be learned by rote or from experience. Like every sentence has a subject and a predicate. There are nouns, there are adjectives, there are verbs. That's information. Putting that information together so that it works out into something, I would call knowledge. All right? Now, let's take a look at where knowledge comes from. True knowledge. In the field of business and finance, there are 3 names that come to mind as being the richest, most powerful men in America. The first is Bill Gates. I wish we had a blackboard here so that I could illustrate these things to you. The first is Bill Gates, Microsoft. He's worth $12 billion now. That's before the introduction of Windows. Right? $12 billion. By the way, $1 billion, right, or $12 billion. Bill Gates could spend $1,000 a day for not 1 year or 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years. He could spend $1,000 a day for 10,000 years and not run out of money. That's how much wealth he has. David Geffen of record fame is worth $4 billion. He can last a long time, too. Kirk Kerkorian, who was relatively unknown until he tried to buy Chrysler Corporation, is worth $2.7 billion. Now, what these three men have in common is there's not a college degree between them. Bill Gates dropped out of college in his sophomore year, and he's running a highly technical business. David Geffen flunked out of college twice. Kirk Kerkorian, his formal education ceased in 8th grade, and he was 16 years old by then. He was so poor that his family was always behind on the rent and had to keep continually moving on to other places. He kept continually changing schools. His education ended in the 8th grade. Three of the richest men in America and in the world, not a college degree between them. There's a man by the name of Gene Clapper who has 70 working patents at IBM. That is, of all the patents he has, 70 of them are actually being utilized in the manufacture of IBM equipment. Gene Clapper, like the other inventive genius, Thomas Edison, neither of them went to college. Where did that inventive engineering genius come from? There was a Russian who was so poor that amongst the poor he was known as poor. His father took him out of school, grade school, when he learned to count to 40, because his father told him, you will never own more than 40 of anything. That boy eventually, when he grew up, joined the Communist Party, and in the revolution in 1970, when he went to Moscow, his fellow communists asked him if he enjoyed ballet. And he said he had never tasted it. He had no cultural background. He didn't know that ballet was dancing. That man was Nikita Khrushchev, and he became the ruler of the second most powerful nation in the world. His father took him out of school when he learned how to count to 40. Where did that man get the political acumen and develop the leadership and the knowledge necessary to be the leader of the second most powerful nation in the world? We're all familiar with Moses, the Buddha, Mohammed. Those men, three men, are responsible for three of the greatest religions in the world. They had no theological training, not one of the three. Now think about this, my brothers and sisters. The richest, most powerful men in business in this country, not a college degree between them. The inventive genius of two famous men never went to college. The leader of the second most powerful nation in the world, taken out of school when he could count to 40. Three of the great religious leaders of all time never had theological training. Where did that knowledge come from? Where did that knowledge come from? That knowledge, brothers and sisters, came from God. If you don't believe in God, it came from the absolute source. And that knowledge flows through men, through their conceptual understanding. And I say men, and I mean men. Men bring knowledge into this world. Men bring knowledge into this world. Not universities, not government grants, not schools. Men bring knowledge into this world from the absolute source. Women deal in information that comes from men. Furthermore, these men, multitudes of men, who are bringing knowledge into this world, have always considered, or have always been called crazy by women, and by men too. Fulton's folly. When Bob Fulton was trying to tinker around and build a steamboat, Fulton's folly. They felt he was loony. Marconi, the man responsible for the wireless, the idea of transmitting sound through the air. Think of this, 100 years ago. His friends took him to see a psychiatrist. They told him, don't worry, everything will be all right. We're going to take you to see somebody. Okay? Anybody who did, Henry Ford was considered crazy. Gandhi was considered crazy. Any man who brought new knowledge into this world, whether in the form of inventiveness, whether in the form of political viewpoint or philosophy, whether in the form of religion, was considered crazy. That's where knowledge comes from. And it used to be that schools had courses that would develop those faculties in men, their reasoning ability, that would make them conducive to bringing in knowledge. Couldn't put knowledge in them. Nobody got a hold of Thomas Edison and said, I'm going to put in you how to invent an electric light, or I'm going to put in you how to make a motion picture camera, or I'm going to put in you how to make a record player. They didn't get a hold of Marconi. They're going to put in you how to make the wireless, or Alexander Graham Bell, and put into him how to make a telephone. Those things don't get put into people, okay? Those things come out of people, out of people. And we try, or used to try, to have in schools to teach those subjects: ethics, mathematics, Latin, Greek, to develop those mental faculties that would enable men to go out there and bring in new knowledge. Today, first of all, I feel one of the major drawbacks in education is co-ed education. Co-ed education has been a failure academically, financially, and socially in every respect. It has watered down the natural abilities of men and women alike. It's created animosity in the classroom and has made the cost of education soar. As I have mentioned many times before, women think visually. They think on a mental screen, and that thinking has form, size, and color. That kind of thinking is necessary for the nurturing of the race. For the nurturing of the race is a very physical thing. Women are the controllers, the rulers of the physical world, and they think in a physical manner. Men think conceptually, and it's conceptual thinking that brings inventiveness into the world. To put the conceptual thinkers and the material thinkers in the same classroom, if you cater to one, you're losing the other. And if you switch your cater to the other one, you're losing to that one. The presentation of knowledge and information to our students becomes mediocre, averaged out. This is not the way education should be, and if you're going to tell me, well, men and women learn the same, they don't. There's nothing similar about a man and woman, and that's what this program has been about for the last 3 years. Now, if that's where you are, this is not the place for you, the program to be listening to. But those who want to challenge me on this, you tell me something that you touched today that did not come from a man. Your alarm clock this morning, your hair dryer, the flush toilet, the toaster, the radio, the television, the car that you took to work, the computer that you're using on the job, the adding machine, the cassettes, the air conditioner. All of these things come from men because they came from conceptual thinking. Those things were not learned in school. Those things were not learned in grade school, they were not learned in high school, and they were not learned in college. It was the conceptual thinking of men. Those who are religious, you can say it's the knowledge that pours from God into man. Whatever you want to call it, that's how it gets there. That's why men need time to ponder. That's why men need time to loiter. Now we have an educational system that is doing away with the training or the basic conditioning of our youth, especially our men, young men, to enable them to bring in the new. If you think about all the inventions that you know, like the airplane, the computer, radar, sonar, atomic power, rocketry, jet propulsion, brothers and sisters, all of those things were before 1950. There's very little new, truly new, that has occurred since 1950. Yes, there's some new, but not much new. Most of what we call new today are just developments of what happened before 1950. Before 1950, we had a masculine-oriented educational system. Now we have a feminine-oriented educational system. It doesn't produce new because it teaches information. It does not cultivate knowledge. It teaches information. It does not cultivate knowledge. And since the feminine nature of government is to create aristocracies, we have now, in our educational system, created an aristocracy of college degrees. If you have a college degree, you're higher than somebody that doesn't have one. If you have a master's degree, you're higher than somebody that has a bachelor's. If you have your doctorate, you're higher than somebody who only has his master's. Now, by these standards, Kirk Kerkorian, David Geffen, Bill Gates are not hireable today. They couldn't get a job in today's market. Not a management job. They're only running half of America. They couldn't get a job because we have this aristocracy of academic credentials. We're teaching our children information. No knowledge. No knowledge. I'm going to give you the difference between information and knowledge. A couple of quick examples here. I got noticed for jury duty. I went downtown and I said, look, I'd like to serve, but my position in life is I can't afford to get sequestered and this is a criminal case. What can you do? The woman said, I can get you off. You want to be on or you want to be off? I said, I don't want to be on or off. I want to be on, but I don't want to get hung in there. She got impatient with me. You want to get on or you want to get off? All right. I told her, get me off. So I told one of the members of this group, and he said, well, you're going to be down there again in 6 months. I said, I know that. You know that. But she doesn't. She's dealing in information, not knowledge. In order to get a knowledge decision, I'm going to have to get bumped up until I finally get a man. Right? Want to hear a good one on that? I was doing research on AIDS to see if it was a communicable disease. I couldn't find any answers around here, so I was told to call the World Health Organization. I called the World Health Organization, and the woman said, well, maybe I can help you. And I said, well, how does a heterosexual man that does not take drugs, how does he catch AIDS from an infected woman? She said, by having unprotected sex. I said, that's information. How do I get it from her? Well, she said, I don't know. I'll have to check. She had to bump me up to the next masculine figure to get a knowledge answer. I called, no, she said, I'll give you the name of my supervisor. I called her supervisor. Her supervisor was a woman also. We went through the whole ritual. She said she wasn't sure. she would check. Now, brothers and sisters, this was 2 months ago. My request has now been faxed to Geneva. I'm not going to get an answer to that question until it bumps up to some man. Notice for a fact, you get information answers from women, you get knowledge answers from men. And I don't care if a woman owns the corporation. Your request that doesn't fit into the information is going to get bumped up to some man in that organization. If there's not a man in it, then you're going to finally get an answer that's an information answer. This is our policy, this is the way it is, and this is the way we do it. Men bring knowledge into this world, not only in machines, in all things. All right, we have a quick review then. Knowledge comes from men. And by the way, if you feel I'm wrong, call me up. Tell me a knowledge that didn't come from a man. Tell me a machine or invention or whatever that did not come from a man. All right? And I will announce it on one of these programs. I promise you I will announce it on one of these programs. So we are teaching information, not knowledge. Okay? The economy is suffering because of it. Now, in closing, I want to say to you something I wrote down here. Women think informationally. There's nothing wrong with it. Women think informationally. That's necessary for the nurturing of the race. Information is a materially oriented subject. The feminine era is the information age. It is also the age of ignorance. And the teaching in our high schools reflects this philosophy. Thank you. I'll see you next week.